Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be doing something a little bit differently. We are going to be doing some fall book recommendations along with my fall TBR. Now in the past I have done mostly monthly TBRs, but I've noticed that when I do monthly TBRs, I don't hit all of the goals that I specifically set for myself. So instead of doing a monthly TBR, I'm basically going to be doing a seasonal TBR where I take about 15 to 20 books roughly, and I don't plan to get through all of them, but they're just like stuff on my radar that I just want to read essentially and put those out into the world and just have them kind of just like here in general so they know kind of what to look for and such. But yeah, I think doing that is probably a little bit more of a more reasonable goal nowadays that I'm going back to school as well and won't be able to like read like 8 books a month essentially. But to first start out with this video, we are going to be doing fall book recommendations like I said at the top, and specifically I have a couple of different categories. We have thrillers and mysteries kind of lumped together along with some romances, along with general and historical fictions that can kind of be thrown in there as well too. And then of course some fantasies as well, because fall time is a perfect time for fantasy reads and like cozy fantasies and especially mysteries and thrillers as well too. So let's first dive into the mystery and thriller genre. So the first, I will technically recommend this as a series, but the other books are not out yet, but right now we have these two, which is The Butcher and the Wren and The Butcher Game by Elena Urquhart. I first read this book back in 2022 when it first came out, loved it, gave it a 5-star, and this book came out last year. I reread this book and then read this book. So good. I will say it does tend to lean a little bit more on the horror side of things rather than the thriller or mystery side, because there are some things in graphic detail. I would 100% look up the trigger warning list if you guys are sensitive to that type of stuff. And it's basically about this woman named Dr. Wren Muller. She is basically investigating this serial killer named the Bayou Butcher, I believe, and it's told in dual POV. You have Wren and then you have the killer, Jeremy specifically. And the first one takes place in New Orleans, and then the second one takes place in Massachusetts. Can't remember exactly in Massachusetts where it takes place, but it's just almost kind of a cat and mouse type of thing and such. It is one of those book series where you can like read them in a day and you'll get done with it because they are super short, they're super fast paced, and they're super easy to read. I'd also recommend the audiobook as well too, because of the fact that they're so quick and easy to read. So those are my first book recommendations that I have. I'm going to put those down. And the next one that I have that was perfect for the fall time that I read last year was Billy Summers by Stephen King. Now I will say this one is not my favorite Stephen King. It is definitely more on the mystery aspect, and this is not any of his horror books. I will say that this is not a horror book by him by any means. It basically follows this assassin who wants to retire, but before he can retire, he has to do one final job, and it kind of goes a little bit wrong, and you basically kind of follow him after this job kind of goes wrong and just kind of seeing what his life is like pretty much afterwards. It was really fast paced, really kind of easy to, I will say, when it comes to Stephen King books, it can kind of be hard to get into it, but if you have like the right mindset for it, you can understand the pacing and why he is talking about all of these things in general. There is a little bit of romance, but not much, I will say, but it definitely, there's also a story within a story as well, so is really good on that end. But yeah, I would 100% recommend this for the fall time. And the next one I have that's also perfect for the fall time that I read last year is The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I've only read the first 2 in the series, and I had the Final Gambit on my August TBR, and hopefully as you guys are seeing this, I have finished that, but we shall see if I did finish the Final Gambit. But this basically follows this 16-year-old, no, not 16, I'm pretty sure she's 17 or something along that lines. She's a teenage girl. Her name is Avery Grams, and she's kind of basically just been living out of her car essentially essentially. And she doesn't really, all she's just trying to do is just kind of get through school and just get out essentially. But then she gets a call from, like, she gets called to the office when she's in school and is literally told, hey, you were left in the will of this really, really rich man named Tobias Hawthorne. And basically you need to go down to Texas and you need to go live in his mansion before you get his inheritance. And Tobias, he technically has a lot of family members, and you have the 4 Hawthorne brothers that you see in this. And basically the Hawthorne family is trying to figure out like why Tobias pretty much left everything to this random girl essentially, and why he left everything to Avery. There's a little bit of romance, there's mystery, there's thrilling aspects as well too. I love this series personally. It was really fast paced. Some of the chapters are like maybe like 2 to 10 pages long, maybe, to be honest, because it is one young adult, and it just wasn't too bad, to be honest. I have the deluxe version right here because I didn't want to pull up all of the books essentially, but this is really, really perfect for the fall time, really easy to get through as well too, and it's young adult as well. So I would 100% recommend that for the fall time. And then the next one that we have is also by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. We also have The Naturals by her. Now this is a little bit more in a realm, in a little bit more of a different realm. This follows this girl named Cassie. She's 17 years old, and she's always been able to kind of profile people and just kind of like understand them from a first glance. She's working kind of at a dead-end job, and then she gets the notice of the FBI. The FBI kind of come up with a proposal for her to kind of go to this program called The Naturals, where they basically take gifted teenagers and help the FBI pretty much solve cold cases. So she decides to join this team, and you get to meet a bunch of other kids. You get to meet another profiler. You get to meet someone who reads emotions. You get to read a mathematician. You also get to meet someone who is a human lie detector. And Cassie has a little bit of a rough patch in her life, and like a rough past, more specifically, because her mother was presumed missing when she was really, really young. Like her mother went missing essentially. And then after a few years, she was pronounced dead because nobody had found her body and things like that. And there's basically a serial killer that is kind of has an infatuation with Cassie and her mother more specifically. So while the team is trying to cover cold cases, there's an active serial killer case going on that is initially tied to Cassie, and you kind of get to see from there. There's so much good found family within this. The subplot of romance is really good as well. This is one of my favorite book series in the world. I initially read this in the summertime, but it's a really, really good fall read. I would recommend it in the fall time because, it's perfect for the fall time. So yeah, that's another one. And then the next one that I have is Darling Girls by Sally Hempworth. I gave this a 5-star originally when I read it also around last fall. I can't remember if I read it in September or October. It's kind of irrelevant at this point when I first read it, but it basically follows these foster sisters named Jessica, Nora, and Alicia. They were basically rescued from family tragedies and were raised by this lovely foster mother named Miss Fairchild. Basically, the town is like, oh my God, you must have lived the best life in the entire world. And the town didn't know is that their childhood wasn't the happy kisses and rainbows that most of the town believed, because years later, after they've gotten out of their foster home, they are doing some renovation on Miss Fairchild's property, and they discover a body. And basically, they have to go back into town and kind of confront the demons of their past, essentially, along with Miss Fairchild as well. I will say, this is not very thrilling. It is more of a mystery aspect than anything, I would say. And if you don't like characters that you kind of don't like in general, then this may not be for you. Some of the characters in here almost kind of felt like, if anybody has read like Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, kind of felt like Juniper in this, but I don't know. It's hard to kind of like say like if I did or did not like the characters, because sometimes I did, sometimes I did not. It just kind of like depended on how I was feeling, honestly. But I would recommend that. It is a mystery, so just beware. You're not going to get many thrilling aspects, because I think one of the main things that people like, this book was published last year, I believe, and one of the main things that people were like, oh my God, this is going to be a great thriller, and not a lot of people rated it highly because they thought it would be a thriller, but this one's more categorized under a mystery. So if you're looking for thrilling aspects, don't go with this one. But if you're looking for like an unsettling mystery, then I would 100% recommend picking up Darling Girls because it is so good. It is really, really good. Okay, and now this is just a book that I read recently in May. Yeah, was it May? Yes, I think it was May that I read this. Or maybe it was June. I think it was June, actually, that I read this. But this is Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey, I believe is how you pronounce her last name. I can never remember if I'm properly pronouncing her name, so I'm sorry if I have or I haven't. But I read this in the summertime, but I also feel like that it could be a really good fall read because you basically follow this family called the Salts. They are living basically on a remote island, essentially on a remote island near kind of Antarctica, near like Australia and such. And they have this whole seed plant that is on there. Like there's a bunch of different seeds from a bunch of different plants that if for some reason the apocalypse starts to happen, people will have food with these seeds. But due to the growing seawater levels, the island is kind of basically almost getting washed away, essentially. So the Salts are basically the only inhabitants of this island, and they're going to be getting out soon. But one night when a random storm happens, they see this woman that has basically washed up onto shore, and she's not doing good. She's not in the greatest of health. So the family decide like, hey, let's nurse her back to health, and then we can like give her shelter, essentially, until like the rescue boats come to get us. And the woman's name Rowan, she kind of like fits into the family, essentially, you know, and it's kind of like just like being there and kind of learning more about the island, essentially. And then also the family kind of realizes that she's not telling the complete truth. And what's really interesting about this book, I listened to it as well. You get Rowan's point of view, you get the dad's point of view, and you get all three kids' point of views. So that was really, really fun to see because the mom is, unfortunately, she passed away. So it's just dad and his three kids, 2 sons and a daughter, I believe. Yeah, 2 sons and a daughter. I love this book. I gave it a 5-star personally. If you go into it just like with the blurb and nothing else, you will love it. You will love it because I will say it is definitely more on the mystery stuff. There are some thrilling aspects, but I would more kind of classify this maybe under a mysterious like fiction book, if that makes any sense. But I loved it. It is good for the summertime, but I also feel like it could be perfect for the fall time. So that's why I also put it in this video as well. And then the last one we have in this category that I read recently is The Missing Half by Ashley Flowers. Now, this one basically follows this girl named Nick. She is basically kind of at a dead-end job and is just kind of like living her life, and it's just kind of like haunted by the past of her or her sister basically going missing. And then she meets another woman whose name is Jules, and her sister is it Jules? I can't remember off the top of my head. Yes, it is Jules. So yeah, Jules basically comes up to Nick and basically says like, hey, my sister Jenna basically, oh wait, is it Jules or Jenna? I can't remember off the top of my head. Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. So the sister, okay, I'm going to start this over essentially. So basically what this is about is it's about this woman named Nick. She's basically at a dead-end job essentially, and she has just gotten a DWI, and basically for the last 7 years she's basically just kind of been like a shell of herself ever since her sister Casey vanished without a trace essentially. And there was this one other girl that vanished. Her name was Jules Connor, more specifically, and many people thought that they were linked, like the disappearances were linked, to say the least. And then Jenna, Jules' sister, basically comes into Nick's life and basically says, hey, I think I have a way to be able to kind of figure out who took our sisters. Do you want to join in? And it's like follows from there, essentially. It is more mystery than thrilling, I will say that. There's not a lot of thrilling aspects with this book, but, you know, it's not bad. It's not bad whatsoever. I can't remember much of what happened in this book, but it's one of these books that I would 100% recommend. And if you have sisters, then maybe this will also kind of like make you feel stuff as well. I don't know what else to say to that, to be honest, because I don't have any sisters, but there's a lot of sisterly love that's talked about in here. So if you like that, then 100% you would like this, essentially. So that's all I have for the mystery and thriller category. Now we are going to dive into the romance and fiction type of genre. This one's a little bit smaller because, I don't really like reading a lot of romances during the fall time, but sometimes I do. Okay, and so the first books that I have, these are technically in a series, but I would recommend the Ruinous Love trilogy. So first we have Butcher and Blackbird, Leather and Lark, and then Scythe and Sparrow. I recently just finished Scythe and Sparrow, gave it a 4.5, really, really liked it. I will just kind of diving into these. These are basically just like dark rom-coms, essentially. It's a dark romance in a romantic comedy. They are really good for the fall and summertime. I mostly read both of these guys in the summertime and I really liked it, but also these could really, really work for the fall time because, dark romance comedy, and these are also really, really good for people who are wanting to dive into dark romance, but don't want to dive into things like Haunting Adeline, essentially. Even though I've never read it, if you dive into Haunting Adeline when you're first getting into dark romance, sometimes it can steer you away, sometimes it can't. But if anybody in my life is like, what would you recommend for anybody who's getting into dark romance? It would be these books. I loved Butcher and Blackbird, didn't really like Leather and Lark that much, and then loved Scythe and Sparrow. But I would recommend the whole series as a whole. They are interconnected standalones, basically following serial killer romances, and they're so funny, they're so crass, but at the beginning of each of the books, each of them kind of have this thing where it's a content and triggers warning list, essentially, where Bryn kind of puts out like a list of all of the triggers that are in each book. So if you do trigger easily, please look at the triggers before buying these books, essentially, because there's a lot of stuff that can happen and it's a dark romance. So yeah. Okay, so going on to the next book. This one's technically a part of the series, but I haven't read the other two yet, so I'm just going to recommend the first book, but it is Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. I read this earlier this year in like February and such, and technically this book doesn't really have like a season set onto it. You can kind of read it any time, but it is definitely for one of those more emotional, if you need to feel a little bit more with a romance, rather than it just being like a silly little rom-com or whatever, definitely pick up this book. I plan on picking up the other books in the series sooner rather than later because one, they are very emotional and they are just like one of those like almost kind of like women's fiction more than romance, essentially. But this one basically follows Yasmin and Josiah. It is basically a marriage, like it's a second chance romance, like marriage in ruins and such. They're kind of trying to combat being co-parents while also owning a restaurant together as well, with some developing feelings still there. And I really liked it. Gave it a 4-star when I first read it, and it's one of those books where the romance is there. The romance is heavily there, but it also has stuff of sisterhood, and it's a lot more mature than most like romance books that I see a lot of the time. So I would 100% recommend this, and maybe recommend the rest of the series, but I'm not too sure. I need to read the rest of the series before I recommend that book. But yeah, and then the next one that I have, it's kind of classified as a romance, but not with who you would think it is, but it's Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. I loved this book. I read it back in May, I believe. I loved this book. I read it around the same time I read Wild Dark Shore. It was so good. It was so, so good. And most people know Alice Oseman for her writing the Heartstopper graphic novels, essentially. And I took the liberty of basically kind of going in her backlist and just kind of like reading exactly like what happened, because she's not just just a graphic novelist. This is an actual novel by her, so it's like words on the page essentially, you know. There's barely any pictures besides at like the front and back cover essentially, you know. But basically with this book, it follows this girl named Frances. She is basically kind of living a double life essentially. She is very much known at school for being the good girl, and she's like the head girl. It also takes place in England because that's where Alice Oseman is from, but she's basically known as the stereotypical studying at home girl, not really much of a partier type of girl, and she's okay with people knowing that about her. But she kind of has this secret life where she loves this podcast that's called Radio Silence, or no, not Radio Silence. The podcast is called Universe City, and she's also an artist, and she loves making fan art for Universe City. And then we meet this guy named Alade. He is the creator of Universe City and then goes on the air as Radio Silence. And he's basically kind of created this podcast. Then, of course, Radio Silence reaches out to Frances to basically be a collaborator with him on the podcast for art. They figure out who they are in real life and they form a friendship based on that. And they continue to kind of do the podcast together. But then when they're recording an episode of their podcast, they kind of get a little bit reckless and they kind of reveal their secret identities, and basically it kind of follows the plot of them, like Frances like learning who she truly is and such, and what it's like to kind of like see whether or not you should kind of be yourself or if you might be met with radio silence, because being yourself around this age is hard, and Alice does a really, really good job at just like writing about it. And I flew through this in like maybe like 3 days, I think. But if you're looking, but like I will say there is romance aspects, but it's not between Frances and Alade. There is romance within this, but it's not between the two of them. It's kind of more in the background with some other characters that they are doing, like that they are like talking with essentially, you know. But yeah, we got that going on. And then another dark romance that's also technically a part of a series is Hooked by Emily McIntyre. This is a part of the Never After series. It's basically a thing of dark romances that are they're almost kind of like fairy tale retellings. So this one does Peter Pan. I have probably the other books up on the screen as well too. I recently read Scarred, which is a one of where it's kind of like a Lion King retelling. The other ones and such are other fairy tales stuff as well too. And I really did like this. I remember it being super, super fast paced. It was another one of those books where it's more on the darker side. So the main character is definitely a lot more on the moral gray side, and the man is the morally gray one, while the woman, she's kind of a little bit like Wendy, she's a little bit more on the innocent side, and James is very much the one that is like trying to kind of mess up her little innocent side, if that makes any sense. But I did like it. I remember breezing by through it, so I would 100% recommend it. And this is also another pretty good starting point to getting into dark romance. It's not the darkest, I will say, but then again, I have not read many dark romances, so I'm still kind of like getting my sea legs when it comes to that. So you can take this, you can pretty much listen to it in one ear and then out the other if you want to. But I would recommend that for the fall time because of just how atmospheric it is, because you'll also see a lot of stuff when it comes to things that you see in like Peter Pan, like the movie and like the actual storyline itself. But yeah, and then another one that I actually read in the fall time last year that's a romance is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Gave this a 6-star. Really, really, really loved this book. It follows Nora and Charlie. Oh my God, I could not remember what his name was, to say the least. But basically Nora, she's a literary agent, and her sister Libby and her decide to kind of go down to this little town called Sunshine Falls in North Carolina, where this huge book that got very, very popular is based at and such. So they were kind of having like the little small town romance. And turns out Charlie is a editor and such. And Nora and Charlie don't really kind of like each other very much. It's not really an enemies to lovers. I would say it's more a dislike to love. And we find out that Charlie is actually from Sunshine Falls, and you get to learn a little bit more about their dynamic and their type of stuff. And it was very much a cozy little book that if you are like deep into the fantasy or deep into the like thriller and mystery, this is a really good like palate cleanser book if you need just a little bit of like happy romance and such, but it's not quite the happiest. If y'all know Emily Henry books, she tackles a lot of like good stuff within the actual book, which is really, really nice. So I would 100% recommend this book for the fall season because I read it during the fall season and absolutely loved it. And then another one that's actually kind of diving into the more historical fiction side of things, we have Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. If you're going to read this, I will 100% recommend the audiobook because you get a whole cast of characters with this. Because the way that this book is written out, it is written out in interview formats. You have interview formats where it's one person talking and then another person is talking essentially, and that type of stuff. I would 100 recommend listening to the audiobook because you get all of the different characters and their different voices essentially for this. And basically what Daisy Jones and the Six is about, it's basically about this girl named Daisy. She's an upcoming girl in LA that's in the late 60s, and basically she is like getting her sea legs with doing music essentially. And then something that's also getting noticed is this band called The Six, where it's this dude named Billy with his girlfriend and his other bandmates and such. As you go on in the book, they decide to join up together. So Daisy Jones comes into The Six essentially, and they do some touring and such. And basically, the story is basically following where they are in interviews with this person, essentially writing a memoir kind of like about this fake band, Daisy Jones and the Six. And it's such a beautiful story. It's so fun to just kind of hear the people's voices and kind of like understand like a fictional band, if that makes any sense. And it's perfect for the fall time. I also read it during the summertime last year, but I would recommend it for the fall time. It is so, so good. It is so, 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 so good. And I will say, if you are gonna read it, listen to the audiobook. You get so many characters. You get so many voice actors for the characters within it as well. And I'm pretty sure it's also a TV show, but I am not too sure, to be honest with you. And then another one kind of going back into the romance category. I didn't bring out all of the books because that would be way too much for me to carry, but it is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. Now, I feel like everybody in the world knows about Heartstopper. This is obviously a graphic novel series. There is 5 graphic novels out currently, with the 6th one being in progress, and the movie is now filmed and being edited as we speak currently. And we're just kind of waiting for when the 6th one comes out. But basically, like it kind of says on the front, is boy meets boy, boys become friends, and boys fall in love, essentially, following Nick and Charlie. Charlie is kind of like the stereotypical like nerdy type of gay guy and such, and he's open out in school essentially, but with that he's gotten a little bit of bullying essentially. And then when the start of the school year starts, they kind of like homeroom and such. They have this thing called form, which in America that's basically called homeroom, and he gets seated next to this kid named Nick, and they kind of become friends. Nick is very much kind of the stereotypical sports person and rugby player, and for basically all around the school, he's very much known as very, very straight. But Charlie kind of starts developing a little bit of a crush on Nick, and this is not really a spoiler because you know what it's about. Nick kind of starts to develop feelings for Charlie. And they kind of like develop this and kind of go through their feelings. And of course, like again, with the boy meets boys, boys become friends, boys fall in love, essentially, you know. And it is really, really good for any time of the year. And these graphic novels are really, really short. They're extremely short. So you can pretty much kind of like get them done in one session, or like even during like a day as well. Each of the times that I read these, I finished them within a day. And you best believe that when the sixth graphic novel gets announced along with the movie, I'm rereading all of these with y'all. Along with reading the sixth graphic novel as well too. I would 100% recommend that, of course, for the fall time as well. Even though you can kind of read it at any time, it is a really, really good series. It's a really, really good series, and I would 100% recommend it to anybody and everyone that I meet now, including you guys. And now the last one in this category, where it's historical fiction and also a romance, a book that recently came out and I have non-stop been thinking about this year, is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love this book so much, and I will recommend it to pretty much anybody and everyone who has ever wanted to read Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is literally the best book that I've ever read. But basically what this book is, it basically follows this woman named Joan. She's very content for her life as like I believe she's an astrophysicist and such. Yes, with physics and astronomy. She's also been obsessed with the stars for pretty much as long as she can remember. She is an aunt to this wonderful niece named Frances. And then she comes across an advertisement seeking the first women scientists of NASA for the shuttle program. And she applies and she miraculously gets in, and then she becomes friends with a couple of people in their space program, essentially. And it happens during the fall. Is it the fall? No, the summer of 1980. And I will say it happens during the fall of 1980, and you get to meet a group of these amazing like candidates like Hank, John, Lydia, Donna, and then Vanessa, and just like these like amazing friends. I'm trying not to spoil anything and such. And they become unlikely friends, and basically prepping for their first flights, Joan finds a love that she never imagined in this new light. Joan begins to question everything she thinks she knows about her place in the universe. And then in December of 1984, on mission STS LR9, everything changes in an instant. And it is just one of those books where you can read basically all the time. Like any time of the year you can read this book. It's not specifically made for any seasons because you get to see all of the seasons, you know. But I will say you can read this pretty much any time, but I'm just adding it in because I will not shut up about this book. It is so beautiful. I have so many quotes. I want to reread it as soon as I possibly can. I have not been able to stop talking about this book. I just love it. I love it so much. I'm going to just kind of stop for now because I think I'm kind of running a little bit low on time, which is fine. But then the next category we have is like fantasy and a little bit of sci-fi. Well, specifically one sci-fi book that I have here, and that is The Ministry of Time by Kaylee Ann Bradley. I really liked this book when I read it, and basically it's kind of a genre-bending book. So you're not just getting sci-fi, you're getting romance, you are getting like a lot of like historical fiction stuff as well too. And basically in the near future, I'm just going to read the blurb because I don't know if I can like really put it into my own words, but in the near future, a civil servant is offered the salary of her dreams to work at a top secret project from the government ministry, basically gathering expats from across history to establish whether time travel is feasible for the human body. And she is tasked with working as a bridge for living with, assisting, and monitoring an expat known as a 1947 or Commander Graham Gore. Essentially, he died on Sir John Franklin's doomed 1945 expedition mission to the Arctic and such, where she's basically just kind of like teaching him a little bit about the 21st century of washing machines, Spotify, and the collapse of the British government, you know. And then over the next year, what begins as an excruciating, uncomfortable housemate dynamic evolves into something much deeper. By the time the true shape of the ministry's project comes to light, the bridge has fallen haphazardly, fervently in love with consequences she never could have imagined. Forced to confront the choices that brought them together, the bridge must finally reckon with whether what she does next can change the future. And we don't know the main character's name. As you're reading, you don't know what the main character's name is. She's never really truly given a name, and that's really interesting to me. And I liked all of the quotes that were in here because they were very much a gorgeous way of writing, and it's a debut novel as well too. And I personally think that this is a really great fall read because of everything that is in it as well. So I will say 100% recommend that. And then kind of going into a little bit more of the fantasy vibe, we have Fairy Tale by Stephen King. I read this in 2023 when I was first like truly getting back into reading. This is not a horror book by him by any means. It is definitely more on the fantastical side and more of the mysterious element. But basically it follows this guy named Charlie Reed. He's just a high school kid who's great at baseball and football, and he's a pretty decent student and such, you know. But his mom was killed in a hit and run accident when he was seven, which in turn drove his dad to drink. Charlie then learned how to take care of himself and his dad, and then when he was 17, he meets a dog named Radar and her aging master, Howard Bowditch, a recluse in a big house at the top of a hill with a locked shed in the backyard, with sometimes strange noises coming out of it. Charlie starts doing odd jobs for him and loses his heart to Radar, which Radar is so beautiful, essentially. And then when Howard dies, he leaves Charlie a cassette tape telling a story that no one will believe. What Bowditch knows and has kept secret his entire long life is that inside the shed is a portal to another world. So it's almost kind of like a reverse Jack and the Beanstalk type of way. If you know that, when he goes up the beanstalk, he basically goes into another world. This one, he's kind of going down into another world, and it's very fantastical. It's very funny. It is very witty, to say the least. And it was definitely a little bit more of a different style to his books, which if you are wanting to get into Stephen King but cannot handle horror, this one is a really, really good one to have and like one to get into. This is a really, really good book for that. I originally got it back in 2022 when it first came out, and it's such a good book. It is truly, truly such a good book. It is very fantastical, like I said, whimsy, and if you are very fan of fantastical whimsiness, there is a little bit of romance in it as well too, so that's fun. But if you want to try Stephen King but don't really want to get into horror, this is a really, really good choice for that. Fairy Tale by Mr. Stephen King. And then the next one is technically the first in a duology because I have not read the second one yet, but we have Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicerelli, and I read this at the beginning of this year for a book club, I believe. And basically what it is, it's basically an enemies to lovers with a witch and a witch hunter basically falling in love. So Rune's life, who's the female main character, her life has changed forever within the aftermath of a devastating revolutions where witches were diminished from powerful rulers to outcast, and witches were basically killed. Rune is a witch, so she needs to hide like what she is essentially. She spent her day pretending to be nothing but a young socialite, and she spends her night as the Crimson Moth, who is a witch vigilante who rescues her kind from being purged, essentially, because in this world, witches are now killed, essentially, for being witches because of things you'll understand when you read the book later. And then when a rescue goes wrong, she decides to throw the witch hunters off her set and gain the intel she needs by courting the handsome Gideon Sharp, who is an unforgiving witch hunter loyal to the revolution and too late Rune realizes she might be falling for him. And Gideon, he is also the captain of the guard of this situation as well too. And it's kind of like a little cat and mouse type of situation. It was really, really good when I read it. I was really on the edge of my seat when it came to this book. It had something that I didn't really see much in other fantasies, and it's a duology. So that means it's really, really easy for me to finish off as well. And one of the things when it comes to that, it is very much one of those enemies to lovers where it doesn't feel like it's a repetition of so many others, because I feel like a lot when it comes to the other fantasies I've read that are very much enemies to lovers, they don't really give that off. But Gideon and Rune are true enemies to lovers. Like they are literally on opposite sides, but yet they feel for one another and they feel love for each other, which is literally one of the more heartbreaking things, but it really is one of those books. It really is one of those books where you don't feel like that you're kind of getting scammed out of it, if that makes any sense. And they do a really, really good job at that. Kristen does, at least. So can you also tell that I'm getting kind of tired? I've been talking for a really long time, but thankfully we are near the end of the book recommendations. I have 2 more books left, and they are also in a duology. We have Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows, a part of the Letters of Enchantment series, I believe, in this duology. I read this around the same time in like October, November time, and I loved the duology itself. I loved the first book. The second one wasn't too bad. The second one's not my favorite, I will say that, but I would recommend the duology just in general. And basically what it is, it follows this woman named Iris. She just basically wants to hold her family together. Her mother is basically suffering from addiction, and her brother is missing from the front lines of this war, essentially. And like in this war, in like this world, the gods have been sleeping for centuries, but now the gods are basically like in a war, essentially, with each other. And then her best bet to help with this is to win the columnist promotion at the Oath Gazette. She's basically kind of like a journalist in this world. And to combat her worry, Iris writes letters to her brother and slips them beneath her wardrobe, where they vanish into the hands of Roman Kit, her cold and handsome rival at the paper. When he anonymously writes Iris back, the two of them forge a connection that will follow Iris all the way to the front lines of battle for her brother, for the fate of mankind and love. So it is very much like a rivals to lovers type of situation. I loved their romance. Their romance, I will say, it is young adult, and I will say the other one was young adult as well too, but this one didn't feel like young adults. Like these 2 books, they don't feel young adult. They don't feel like they are like made for like 15, 16-year-olds. Like you can read these because older people can read these and be a-okay, because they feel and are written a lot more mature, if that makes any sense, than like for like younger audiences. It is obviously young adult. I would recommend these 100%. They're perfect for the fall time, especially during like October time. They are completely perfect during the fall time and such. That is the end of the book recommendation. Specifically, if you don't want to hear my fall TBR and you just only came for book recommendations, thank you guys for watching, and just like let me know if you plan on reading any of these book recommendations as well too. Now let's get on to my fall TBR. Okay, so diving into the first book that I have on my fall TBR, I have about 20-ish books on here roughly, but the first one I have is The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Lori Gilmore. I just need to try and read this. I tried to read it last year, but then kind of softly DNF'd it because I wasn't in the mood for it at the time. But I really want to try and read this again because it's cozy. It literally embodies fall, so why not? And it's basically the small town spicy romance, essentially, is what it is. I'm going to put that back here. Maybe. Yeah, we'll put it back there for now so that y'all can see it and such. And then the second one that I have on my list is You've Reached Sam by Dustin Thau. I have wanted to read this book for a really, really long time. It is a little bit on the sadder side, I will say that, but I don't mind because it's one of those books where it's kind of also perfect for the fall time. If you need to feel a little bit more emotions as well, it's one of those things where like, you know, I can just pick it up and like probably get it done within maybe like a couple days since it's so small essentially. But it basically follows this girl named Julie. Her boyfriend Sam recently passed away. She kind of like skips the funeral and is kind of like grieving in a really, really like interesting way. She calls his phone and he picks up, and basically it just kind of follows from there where that is happening essentially, you know. It is, I've heard that it's really, really sad. You can tell by the cover that it's extremely sad, but I am not opposed to that essentially. I'm not opposed to sad books. And then the next one that I have, most of these are on my physical TBR, so I'll probably go back at the end and what I have on my list as well too. But the next one that I have on my physical TBR that I've had on my radar for a long time is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Tooton? I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, but I got put onto this book by a friend of mine in college, and I've been wanting to read it for such a long time. And basically there is a death. Evelyn Hardcastle, she's being murdered essentially. She's getting murdered at 11 p.m. and there are basically 8 days and 8 witnesses for you to inhabit. And basically this dude named Aiden basically gets thrown into people's bodies essentially to kind of figure out what exactly happened to Evelyn and why was she murdered and who was she murdered by, which I don't know about y'all, but that sounds great. So that's up on the list for me as well too. And then the next one I have is Wretched by Emily McIntyre. This is the third book in the Never After series. I recently just read, I recently read Scarred. Loved that book. That one was a Lion King retelling. I believe this one is a Wizard of Oz retelling essentially, you know, where it follows this girl named Evelina and such, and I think she's like a drug lord and such, but I'm not too sure, to be honest with you. Yeah, I think she is, because Nicholas is basically an undercover DEA agent, basically on hell-bent destroying the drug trade that devastated his family and such. So she is the villain in this, which I think would be great to read. That'll be fun to read. I've never really read I've read dark romances where the women are very much on the morally gray side. So I'm excited to dive into that. That just seems like the perfect time for that, essentially. And then next one I have is A Brick. I will not be reading it physically because I have it on my Kindle, but it is Needful Things by Stephen King. I picked this up one day because my mom literally said, "Hey, it's a Stephen King book. You might like it." And I said, "Okay." Add to cart. So that's how that happened. And it looks like it follows this town called Castle Rock in Maine, where it's seen its fair share of oddities over the years, and nothing is as particular as this little carouse shop that's just opened for business here. Its mysterious proprietor, Leland Gaunt, seems to have something for everyone out on display at Needful Things. Interesting items that run the gamut of from worthless to priceless and such. Nothing has a price tag in this place, but everything is certainly for sale. The heart's desire of any residents of Castle Rock can easily be found amongst the curiosities and such. And I'm guessing there is a whole other thing like related to like supernatural shit, to be honest with you, because you know it's Stephen King. You've always got to have something supernatural in his books because that's just how he rolls. That is just truly how he rolls, essentially. The next one I have is Finley Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimino. I do remember what her name is and such, but I've heard that this is very much a cozy mystery where basically Finley is talking about a book with her agent and gets mistaken as a hit woman. And so Finley just kind of like dives into this and is being like, okay, I'm a hit woman, I guess, from what I've heard. And it's a series from what I've heard. So we shall see. We shall see how this is. And then the next one that I have, I forgot to grab it, but it is, did I forget to grab it? I did forget to grab it, but you know what? I might as well go grab it while I'm here. Okay, and then the next one that we have that I actually had on a previous TBR earlier this year is actually Indigo Ridge by Daphne Perry. This is very much a mystery romance type of book, and I'm very much interested to dive into this series. I've heard that the Edens, lots of people love this series because it's a like murder mystery with romance essentially, and that would be nice. That'd be nice to read in the fall time, and I've heard that lots of people can get through it really, really fast, so that's definitely on my list for now, essentially. And then the next one that I have that I also want to read is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I've read Yellow Face by her, but I have not read anything else by her yet. And this guy's a brick. He's low-key a brick, to say the least, but, I'm not too intimidated by that. Basically, you're following this guy named Robin Swift. He is an orphan, and he is trained underneath Professor Lovell and such, and he basically trains in Latin, ancient Greek, and Chinese, all to be prepared for Oxford University's prestigious Royal Institute of Translation, also known as Babel, essentially, and I'm pretty sure it's all people of color, POCs, I think, that is in this one, and that type of stuff, essentially. For Robin, Oxford is a utopia dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge, and in his studies he is caught between Babel and the shadowy Hermes society, an organization dedicated to stop imperial expansion. When Britain pursues an unjust war with China over silver and opium, Robin must decide what does that say? I can't remember off the top of my head, but he must decide basically what side of the war he's on, essentially. So that one is definitely one that I will definitely be reading in the future. There goes the books, but that's okay. It can live right there. Yeah, that can live right there for now. The next one that I have on my list is actually a book that I saw enough last year, but I'm bound determined to read it, but it is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Everybody loves V.E. Schwab and her novels. I follow her on Instagram. She's so sweet. She just recently came out with Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil, and I was going to put that on my list, and maybe I'll put that on my radar, but it's not a priority like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I still have a bookmark for when I stopped in it, but I don't remember much of it, so I will definitely be going back and rereading it. But basically it follows this woman named Addie. She basically makes a deal with the devil, and you follow her throughout the years that she has been alive, essentially, and in 300 years she stumbles into a hidden bookstore and discovers someone who can remember her name, and that changes everything, essentially. So that one is definitely high up on my list. And then another one that is also on my physical side of my TBR is Loveless by Alice Oseman. This is not a romance. It's basically just a young adult novel, essentially, and it basically follows this girl named Georgia. She doesn't understand why she can't crush or kiss or make out with anyone like her friends do, and everyone seems to say that dating and sex equals love. It's not until she gets to college that she discovers the A range in the LGBTQIA plus spectrum, coming to understand herself as asexual and aromantic. And I haven't really seen many books talking about asexuality and aromantic people, so I always kind of like to educate myself on that, because I've had a couple friends in the past who identify themselves that way, and I always want to be able to kind of understand where they're coming from, and being able to read it in fiction sounds just so great. It sounds so great to be able to do so. And the next one that I have on my list is Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I am making it my mission to go back into Taylor Jenkins Reid's backlog to basically read every single book that she has put out and more when she puts it out in the future, essentially. But it basically follows this woman named Carrie Soto. She was a very famous tennis player. She retires from tennis and she's the best player in the world, essentially. But then, and she's shattered pretty much every single record. But then 6 years after her retirement, she finds herself sitting in the stands of the 1994 US Open, watching her record be taken from her by a stunning new footballing player named Nikki Chen. And then Carrie basically makes the momentous decision to come out of retirement for one last year, reclaiming her record essentially. And sounds so much fun. I really want to dive into that. It's just like, it's one of those things where it's like gives me a little bit of a break between the spookiness and such. So I'm happy about that. And then also, this is the second in a series that I talked about in recommending my books, but this is Rebel Witch by Kristen Cicerelli. This is the second book in the Crimson Moth duology, and I've been needing to read it for a long time. I need to refresh myself on Heartless Hunter before diving into Rebel Witch, and I'm excited to see where Kristen takes it, since we ended off in like a really like interesting way off of Heartless Hunter, and I'm like, where is this gonna go? And also, this is the Barnes and Noble exclusive edition. I'll probably be listening to it, but I don't know, to be honest with you. I really don't. And then the next one that I have on here is a book that I have on my 25 books to read in 2025, and a book that I've been wanting to read for just forever and such, and that is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. This is basically about this girl named Eleanor. She basically struggles with social skills and tends to say exactly what she's thinking. And she's like one of those things where like she is just okay with just like her life, and then she meets this guy named Raymond, who is the bumbling IT guy from her office, whose big heart will ultimately help Eleanor find the way to repair her own profusely damaged one, and just kind of follows from there. It's a short little book, easy to read and such, which I'm really excited to dive into. Also, this is one of my favorite booktubers' favorite books, Kalila Denson and such, and maybe I will make something out of a series and such, and like reading books that my favorite booktubers like, but we are not too sure. Not too sure on that, to be honest with you, but that is a-okay to say the least. And then the next one that I have that has been on my TBR forever, it is The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. I've only read one Frida McFadden book by her, and I didn't like it very much. I'm not gonna lie, didn't really like it, and that was The Boyfriend by her, but I've heard that The Housemaid is significantly better than than like that book more specifically, and basically what it is follows this woman. I can't remember what the woman's name is. I don't think it says, but she basically is the housemaid, and she's basically just like cleaning this house from top to bottom, picking up this family's daughter from school, cooking delicious meals from the whole family, and then heading up to eat alone in her tiny room on the top floor. Things along that line, essentially. I don't really know what it's about too much. I kind of like going into it blind, so I will definitely be doing that. And then the next one that I have is one that I'm probably going to start at the beginning of September-ish, or maybe even before like September actually starts, is On Writing, a memoir of the craft, and by Stephen King, which is his memoir basically on writing. I'm currently writing my debut novel right now, so I need all of the help that I can personally get when it comes to writing a debut novel, because it's hard. Writing is hard, to say the least. I will say that. Writing is really hard, and just one of those things where it's like, whoa, but it basically is just like it's a memoir, essentially. It's talking about writing and what it's like to write and that type of stuff. So that is definitely on there. And then the last of my physical TBR, I have a little bit of a curveball, I will say that, but I have Heartless by Elsie Silver. Now, I read Flawless last month, I believe. I read Flawless in June. Really loved that book. Really loved it. Gave it a 4-star. And then this is the second book in the series, which is the Chestnut Springs series. I've been kind of weary about reading this series, but ever since I read Flawless for my 24-hour readathon, I'm like, let's get all the books. Let's get through all the books, because I didn't think I would like a cowboy romance, but surprisingly, I do. I do like me some cowboy romances. So, this one follows Cade and Willa. So it's a little bit of an age gap and single dad nanny situation. And I know lots of people go feral for that. I don't know if I will go feral for that, but we shall see. So those are all the books on my physical TBR. The other books that I have on here that are on like my Kindle TBR is The Modern Girl's Guide to Magic by Lindsay Hall, The Queen's Rising by Rebecca Ross, Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers, and then Wayward by Emilia Hart. Those are all of the books that I pretty much have on my radar, and that is officially the end of the video. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if you guys are going to read any of the books that I have listed off. Let me know if you guys are going to read any of the book recs that I gave you as well. All of my social media will be hopping up on the screen, along with it linked in the description down below as well too, along with the chapters as well too of the book recs into the fall TBR and such. And I hope you guys have an amazing day, week, month, and year. See you later, friends.